Welcome back, part 3 of the October Q&A. This is not the month where we do the 4 parts that we promised that we'd one day do.
Have we ever... I feel like we have done 4 once.
Have we?
I'm not sure. We have to look back at the archives.
Yeah, okay, you can do. That's your job now.
Okay.
You put your foot in it.
I'm not going to do it.
Okay, well. All right, keep that on the down low next time. Maybe I can still hear you. Let's just get into it. But before we do, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and the new Duranaut High Performance Thermal Paste. Duranaut offers extreme long-term stability combined with outstanding thermal conductivity, and this has been achieved through a specially engineered silicon oil combined with aluminium microparticles and zinc oxide nanoparticles of various shapes. Duranaut isn't electrically conductive and won't harden over time. For best performance, you'll want to apply a very thin layer, and to help with this, included is the TG Spatula Pro. The spatula's revised design allows for increased pressure during application, making it easy to spread a thin, even layer of Duranaut. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. Alright, interesting question here. Often people say that CPU lineups tend to have lots of SKUs because OEMs and businesses want many, to the point that there are CPUs which only have a 100 megahertz boost clock, difference, and a $5 price difference in the same lineup. So just like heavy binning for reasons. Why don't you? This is the question. Why don't you think this happens for GPUs? So it's not really questioning why it happens for CPUs. Kind of answer that. Why don't we see the same heavy product segmentation for GPUs?
I think it does happen. It's just it doesn't happen in the way that this question sort of frames it. I think the difference is that with CPUs, you're buying the product directly from Intel or AMD. So they're making a ton of different models to satisfy all the different price points. Whereas with the GPUs, NVIDIA and AMD make the GPUs, and Intel, I guess. But then there's AIBs that adds another layer onto things. And AIBs will often have multiple different models of the same GPU.
That's true.
MSI, how many 5070s do they make? Like
and
6 of
them? And they vary slightly in clock speed and stuff.
That's right. There'll be the base model, then different levels of factory OC. Some of them will have different coolers and designs. There'll be more premium, so you can spend $10 or $20 more to get a slightly nicer cooler or slightly nicer design. And so I think that's where the product segmentation goes. It's a very similar thing, because I think if you went onto Newegg and you sorted all of the GPUs from the lowest to highest price, you'll find a GPU at...
Yeah, Asus probably have more RTX 5070 Ti's than there are current generation Ryzen CPUs.
Yeah, that's right. So there'll be every price point between the $750 MSRP right up to the $1,000 5080 MSRP. They'll try put it like water-cooled or liquid-cooled ones. Like at $900, $950.
I forget now, because with MSI you've got like the Shadow is now because the Ventus for a very long time was the entry level.
Yep.
But I think the entry level is now the Shadow.
Yep.
Then you've got the Inspire series, and there's like the Inspire X2, X3. I think there's a Shadow, probably X2, X3. Then you got the Ventus, which has the various different X's, which represent the number of fans on the cooler. And then there was the Gaming X Trio, but now there's like the Gaming, and there's the Gaming Trio, and then I think maybe there's don't know if they still have the Gaming X Trio.
And there might be OC and non-OC versions, especially for the lower tier models.
Yep, and then you got now the Supreme at the top. And
there's a Vanguard as well.
The Vanguard got chucked in there. So, yeah, MSI is another example where there's just so many different versions of the same, essentially, GPU. It's just what you want wrapped around it. So anyway.
Yes, I think like why don't the GPU vendors themselves, like AMD or NVIDIA, do this? I think they still want to have that little bit of wiggle room on the clock speeds happening at the AIB side, because they still want AIB partners. So they need something to give them that can sort of differentiate their models. So they'll often have, different OC SKUs, which is, it's sort of not really a SKU, but they have like
because now there's the Shadow and the Shadow OC, the Ventus and the Ventus OC, the Vanguard and the Vanguard OC.
Yeah, I think how it works right is that they create like a base spec for a specific GPU, but then they also have like these OC targets that you can sort of dial into your models. So NVIDIA and AMD effectively do the work of figuring out what clocks you can go up to, and you just choose one of those profiles to insert into your factory OC model. And so they give that to the AIBs as sort of like here, you can use this to differentiate products, as opposed to doing what Intel or AMD does, which is make a bunch of different CPUs with different like megahertz counts. You don't really see too many like weird core count configurations on the CPUs. Like you don't see 7-core and 5-core models.
At least anymore.
Whereas on the GPU side, like they could do stuff like that, but it would still be more minor variances. The most dies have a binned version. So you've got the full version, a binned version, maybe 2 bins depending on the GPU die they're making. CPUs, you see a very similar thing, 1 or 2 bins for each. AMD, for example, you've got an 8-core and a 6-core die bin, really, and a Vcache version. So that's 3. So it's very similar to GPUs on that front.
Now, this question has raised some it's a frustration because it is on me. I'll take blame for this because I should have reminded you this morning before you left to bring your crystal ball. We've forgotten about the crystal ball. How many times has it come up? We don't have the crystal ball.
A few times.
When was the last time we used it? Like 18 months ago or longer?
Yeah, and it did cost me a bit of money. There's a few $100s, I think.
We're not getting our return on the crystal ball.
Yeah, not getting good money.
We could probably add some RGB to that thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what we're going to have to do to get the crystal ball here, but
I'll just have to remember one time. I know where it is.
I think we need to put something in place because the have to remember one time has failed us for about 18 Q&A sessions now.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, maybe in the comments, how do people remember things?
Yes.
Let us know, and we'll implement whatever it is that we need to make sure that next time we have the crystal ball here for the crystal ball question, which is, how big do you think the Zen 6 upgrade will be? Are you anticipating 10 to 15% more? Zen 5's lackluster 3 to 5% again. I hope not. Yes, we hope not as well. Otherwise, AM5 is in for a rough ride. So I have absolutely no idea, and it is a crystal ball question. So
it's not based on rumors or leaks or things we've heard, really. This is just a guess, to be very clear.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact details, but I was talking with someone at a brand about Zen 6 because they were assuring me that Zen 6 was going to be on AM5, and they were suggesting that we could be seeing it sort of as early as like CES announcement, but it seems like it may have been delayed or pushed back a bit from that. But this was earlier in the year when I got this information. And they were really suggesting like at least a 20% performance uplift. Like it was going to be much, much more substantial than we'd seen from the prior generation. Because I sort of said to them, would it be as much as 20%? And they were sort of nodding, saying, yeah, it'll be at least that. So no idea. Like maybe, I don't know. I wouldn't make any bets based on that information. But I'd be hoping for it, given how underwhelming Zen 5 was, I'd be hoping for at least a 20% performance uplift.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that would be a good target to aim for. I think if you look across the history of the main Zen generations outside of Zen 5, something around 15% IPC improvement was pretty typical. Now, I'm not suggesting that we will get that again each generation forever because, gains get harder to come by, but that was typical at one point, so there's that angle. There are rumors that it will be 2 process nodes further along, so a 2 process node jump, so Zen 5 was no process node jump, hence why we didn't see too much of a performance increase or anything really happening there, outside of obviously some server workloads and things like that. So with that in mind, plus the potential for some of the memory side things to be improved with the new I/O die, you'd probably be hoping for a fairly substantial gain if both of those things turn out to be true. I would think that if you're going 2 process nodes further along and changing the I/O die to be a newer design, better integrated, then both of those things should be giving a fairly substantial performance improvement. And then there's as well the potential for CCD changes to use more cores as well, which I think has been rumored as well, like a potential 12-core CCD instead of 8 cores. So all of those things combined, obviously the core count thing may not play out for gaming, but if all of those things come together in the one product, Zen 6 should be a fairly substantial gain. But we don't know how many of those things are true, whether any of it's true. So we'll just have to wait and see, because I would be expecting it around the middle of next year.
It seems like that's probably going to be more likely now, but
we'll have to see.
We'll
Yeah.
wait and see. Do you think Intel will lower their prices for their next CPU line? So not the current stuff, their next generation CPUs. Difficult one to answer without seeing the next generation lineup, because the next generation lineup could be better than what AMD has, and therefore they wouldn't need to reduce prices because, they could be back on top. I have no idea what the future holds for Intel CPUs. Does seem a bit unlikely based on how things are currently going along. But if they're much more competitive and say they do commit to platform longevity and say, look, we're going to have at least 3 or even 2 totally new architectures released on this platform over the next X amount of years, then that becomes really enticing and something that could be worth investing in. But again, it depends on performance and all of that. It's kind of like performance comes first, and that sort of dictates what price they can ask. And it also depends on what competition they're facing at the time, because obviously Zen 6 should be a thing by then.
Mm-hmm.
Is Zen 6 a 5% gain, a 20% gain or more? There's so many factors at play there. But to date, they haven't been that willing to really reduce prices heavily. I know the 265K, the 265K has become much more competitively priced, and that's really, on its own, I would say a highly attractive proposition. Again, the problem for me is the platform, because we know for a fact that there's nothing more coming there. Like, yes, there's a refresh, but that's offering nothing. That's like 13th gen to 14th gen, really nothing on offer there. Whereas we know with AM5, you are getting Zen 6, and Zen 7's rumored, so we get to see that one.
That was one of the things I was going to bring up, was like the CPUs themselves, like the pricing that they've done for, what is it, Arrow Lake right now, it doesn't seem that bad, but then it's still like, it's kind of nowhere near cheap enough to actually entice the masses to consider it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like it's in a weird position where it's both at the same time. Like it's cheap, especially compared to the launch price of the part, but it's also still too far from where it should be, and that's kind of all Intel has been willing to do. The fact that they've even dropped the CPU to the price that it's currently at is something we probably wouldn't have seen a couple of generations ago. So it seems like they're at least a little bit willing to adjust pricing if they're not competitive. But I don't think we're seeing like first or second gen Ryzen sort of pricing, where we used to see like 2600s in the sort of low $100 range.
They were less than a third the price of the Intel competition at the time.
Then they seem to be, I don't know whether it's because the chips are not, you can't sell it at that price economically because they're too expensive to manufacture, or whatever the case is. Don't know, but they're not willing to go that low. So they're just sort of like testing the water. It feels like they're testing the waters with a discount. Mm-hmm. I feel like if they're in a similar competitive position, because of course we can't predict the performance, so we don't know how good they're actually going to be. But if the next gen is in a similar competitive position to Arrow Lake now compared to Zen 5, then they'll need to get much more aggressive with pricing than they have been. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether they will, but I mean, the sales of Arrow Lake have been very bad, is my understanding.
Yeah, extremely bad. They need to axe prices and make them dirt cheap, because again, you're buying into what is, it's known to be a dead platform.
Yeah, it's an ecosystem decision.
Yeah, there's no, if I built a Core Ultra 7 265K system and a Ryzen 7 9700X system, and configured them with, same power supply, same GPU, equivalent motherboard, put them together, which is video maybe I'll do. I don't really think you'd be able to tell the two systems apart. Like if you played Battlefield 6, you'd mm-hmm. set medium settings or whatever with a mid-range GPU. I think the experience would be much the same. Where things between those systems change massively is compiling shaders, productivity, stuff like that. So if you do have a real need for that sort of stuff, then maybe there's an angle there where you could go the Core Ultra stuff or go AM5 and just spend a bit more money because it's more of a long-term investment.
Yep.
What was the question?
Will Intel lower CPU prices? I mean,
it depends.
It depends.
It depends. There you go.
Should I hold out for high-end Intel Battlemage later this year and see what it has to offer, or pick up a 9060 XT 16GB at 530 Canadian dollars, which is equivalent to $380 US, so slightly above, I guess, the MSRP? I mean, the first thing is we don't actually know whether high-end Intel Battlemage is a thing. we've talked previously, I think in the podcast, about how high-end Battle Mage has a few challenges to overcome before it can actually be like a viable solution. You know, the overhead issues that sort of hurt its performance in a way on sort of the target system, so sort of like your mid-range entry-level PCs.
It's been fixed to a degree, like it can be addressed on a per-game basis, but
Yes.
as a default sort of out of the box when the game launches, if it's a game that's going to have that problem, it's going to have that problem.
Mhm.
Intel then has to invest time and resources to solve the problem. Whether they can more streamline that process, the more familiar they become with the
Yeah.
we don't know what's involved, I guess. Like, it could be a huge investment on their behalf, or it could be something that once they fix it for one Unreal 5 engine game, it's relatively simple to implement those fixes for the next Unreal 5 engine game. Zero insight into that.
Yeah, I think one of the key issues that, you know, this high-end Battle Mage product is going to face, if it does exist, is the sort of price to performance ratio. The B580 got a lot of hype because at the time we weren't aware of what products would be available in that sort of lower tier part of the market. And so what we were comparing it to was like the performance of 4060s and that sort of thing. And so it was both faster and had more VRAM than those parts. Sort of great buys. We said at $250, not that you could buy them for $250 for a while there. Today, though, the B580, it still has that VRAM advantage over the lowest tier models, but the performance advantage in a lot of ways has disappeared. The 9060 XT 8GB model is quite a bit faster than a B580, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think the B580, you're right, and the B580 as a result has started dropping below the MSRP now.
Yes, but so is the 9060 XT 8GB, because
Well,
that was sort of
yeah.
coming down towards
That's
B580,
true,
which
yeah,
is probably
yeah.
why it's moved down
It's
as
pushing
well.
it down because it's just there's no other way to sell them.
Yeah, so that's the problem is, what's the performance of that Battle Mage card going to be, and are they going to be able to do something like a B580 in terms of offering what other models don't offer in that tier? I don't think they'll have a VRAM advantage. It's not going to be 12 versus 8. The cards they'll be competing against will have at least 12 gigabytes. AMD will have 16 in that price range. So that's a problem. And then, yeah, the performance, maybe they could offer it for like the high tiers of performance for very cheap. Is it economically viable? I don't know. But I think like the 9060 XT 16GB, if that's the card that you're sort of going, do I wait or buy a 9060 XT 16GB? The 16GB model of that GPU is very good. Like it's a great value product. It runs games really well. It's fast in that price, very competitive. So it's not like you're buying like a 4060 Ti from the previous generation where in that sort of price tier, you was kind of stuck with this crappy sort of option.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a genuinely good mid-range mainstream-ish GPU. So
One of the biggest performance uplifts we've seen for like 4 or 5 generations.
Yeah, it's a good quality product. You're not getting stuck with this piece of crap. So from that sense, I think you should, even today, just be very happy with that purchase. And I wouldn't be waiting for a card that may not exist.
Well,
if
Black
I'm perfectly
Friday's
honest.
coming up later in the month. Next month, technically, though probably this month by the time you watch this. I don't know what's going to happen in your region for Black Friday, but I'd be on the lookout for some discounts and sales there. Something good might pop up. But essentially, if you're asking us, should I wait for a GPU that may or may not exist? And then I don't know when availability is going to be, well, good enough for me to actually purchase it at whatever the MS.
Yeah, that was a big B580 issue. Is it took more than 6 months because it launched in December of last year, right?
And we don't even know whether the MSRP that ultimately gets set even makes sense. So
yeah,
there's all of those unknown variables. Yeah, I would just be looking at buying something now, and with Black Friday coming up later in the month, maybe I would just hold out till then and see if any good deals pop up. And there are some YouTubers that do Black Friday type deals and monitor GPU pricing. I think Daniel Owen does a good job of that. So maybe go subscribe to his channel and keep an eye out to see if he does that, because I think he did that for Prime Day as well. He noted some good GPU. He put some, maybe he doesn't even make a video, it'll just be on his like post, what do they call now? Post tab? It used to be the community tab. I think it's called Posts now. Posts or something.
Interesting.
Anyway, whatever. The thing. Let's move on to the next one. All right. Are thermal pads like Thermal Grizzly? Yes, Thermal Grizzly. Check the link in the video description. I don't even know if the Thermal Grizzly ad was shown on this video, but if it was, check the link in the video description. Do that regardless, I think. Are thermal pads like Thermal Grizzly Cryo Sheet and or phase change pads like PTM 7950 things you have considered using from a practical or performance perspective? or are the variances in performance too different? So we've definitely used a lot of we've used the cryo sheet, for example. They're kind of fun to use whenever we do GPU teardowns. So I test the GPU with the factory whatever it has on it, see how that performs, measure the performance, tear the card down, and then I have to wipe away that stuff, usually for a die shot, and just best practice to clean all that off and apply some new thermal paste. And sometimes we use like different types of thermal grizzly compounds or Arctic, different brands. And yeah, a few times I've tried the cryo sheet and found that to be extremely similar to models that came with liquid metal, because, clean all liquid metal off, I can re-add it, or I can use the cryo sheet, and I much prefer the cryo sheet. It's just a cleaner, simpler, safer, in my opinion, thing to use. So performance was really good with the cryo sheet when I tested it out. Someone will be like, what video was it that you used that? Because I want to have a look. And it may have been like a 5090 liquid, like an MSI liquid, or it might have even been my Asus 4090 Matrix video. You know what? Balin can try and find it. I'm sorry, guys, I forget. We make a lot of content, but I have tested it before, and the results were really impressive, very similar to liquid metal. And you haven't played around with the phase change pads much. But yeah, they're definitely things that I would use. But for the majority of the testing we do, we just use your plain old thermal pastes, because it'd just be a waste. Like the cryo sheet, for example, not sure how reusable that is. It depends how crushed and damaged it gets when you apply pressure to it. I applied a cooler, tested it, and took it off, and it was fine. I'm not sure how many times you do that before you wreck it, but they are sort of cut to size as well. But for the CPU cooling, I don't know how much thermal paste I've used on that 50 motherboard video, but yeah, when we're
big old tub,
or when I'm testing, CPU performance in Battlefield 6, in a matter of days, I swapped out over 30 CPUs, and that's reapplying paste, cleaning off the cooler, cleaning off the CPU, reapply. I keep doing that over and over again, so I just use cost-effective thermal paste because it works well enough and it's more practical for that high volume kind of stuff, which you guys wouldn't be doing. So
yeah, I've always thought these sorts of products are meant for like enthusiast people, really. Like I remember back in the day when I had more time on my hands, it's a bit of fun to sort of tinker, make sure that your PC's running at the coolest temperatures that it can, and sort of optimize all that stuff. These days, though, I just don't have the time for that stuff anymore. So I just like the easy, sort of cheap solutions, really.
I think where the cryo sheet can make sense is for stuff like GPUs, because you can buy them, for the specific die size.
Yeah, but
they're relatively safe and easy to install, and then you have to worry about thermal paste drying out and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's still something that you'd only apply, though, if you were like an enthusiast sort of person. Whereas for me, I just get the graphics card, I'm like, all good, and I just slot it into my system.
And if it's an older system, it's more cost effective to take the cooler off, clean off the goo that's there, and then just reapply some standard stuff.
Some standard cheap,
rather than pay a heap of money for an old product. So.
Yeah, but certainly if you love doing that sort of tinkering and stuff, which I used to love doing, making sure, can I get like a couple of degrees here or there? How much more can I squeeze out of this? And these products are really awesome, and just things that weren't available back when I was doing that sort of thing, or at least were very, very niche sort of experimental things. But now they're actual products that you can buy, which is very cool. All right, Steve, this is directed squarely at you.
Good.
Do you have any comments on the fact that on a lot of PC building communities, people are choosing motherboards twice or more expensive because they want to avoid bad VRMs, even for their lower power Ryzen 5 or 7 CPUs, and they link your VRM testing videos when asked why?
Oh, thank you for that. Appreciate the links. So the question is suggesting, like, if they only needed a $100 board, they're buying $200 boards?
That seems to be the implication, yeah.
Well, if they're doing that, they're watching the video wrong. It's like, no, in all seriousness, sorry, I just kicked the desk. I don't know why you would be doing that, because the whole goal of the VRM videos is to test boards at certain price ranges and see which ones are good and which ones aren't. And usually I focus initially at the more entry-level, cost-effective boards, because that's usually where we find some bad ones and some good ones. So we're sort of rooting out the good ones there and, hey, buy these instead of these bad boards that are power limited or throttle or whatever it may be.
And the good ones aren't necessarily much more expensive.
Sometimes they're cheaper.
They're just another option.
Well, I mean, as one example, we recommended buying the ASRock B650M-HDV/M.2. That's almost a monitor.
You tell me monitor names are bad and you've just rolled out that one.
That's almost a monitor. Maybe it is a monitor and not a motherboard. I'll have to check. But anyway, they released that board and it turned out to be the most affordable B650 motherboard, and it ran really well. Used power stages, VRMs were great, and as a result, it was the most popular motherboard ASRock made in that lineup. Do you remember when we went to Computex?
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was.
It would have been
2023, right?
It would have been the year after they had released that series.
Actually, yeah, it might have. I can't remember. It's a blur now. Computex. They'll roll into one. Anyway, the board had been out for a while, and they were launching 800 series boards. And at their booth at Computex, they had like, the liquid. What was it? They
had a wall of motherboards. This is how they usually display. They've got like a huge wall with like 20 different boards.
There was like X870 everywhere, and there was the high-end Intel boards. There was all these high-end, glorious-looking motherboards, and then smack bang right in the middle was the HDV M.2, the B650 board. Oh, that's really weird.
Why is that hit there with all the new stuff?
And so I walked up to the motherboard PM, and he knew who we were, and I said, I have to ask you, why is that motherboard right in the middle of your display? And he starts laughing and just points at me, and I'm like, what? And he's like, you guys made this board like our top selling board. He goes, this board outsold all of our other motherboards combined for that chipset. So a lot of you are buying that particular board. Probably it seems largely based on our recommendation. I'm sure other people tested it and found it to be a good value board as well. So really, we sort of pride ourselves on trying to find the best value boards. And it's like, I sort of said to him, I don't hate it, but I find it a little less useful testing the higher end boards, but so many of you just want those boards to be like, I suppose, validated by us, even though they've got like 1480 amp power stages on the V course. It's like, yeah, look, that's probably going to work. But when you get like the lower end boards that might have, 660 amp power stages or, discrete MOSFETs or whatever it may be, and they have like power limits or they thermal throttle or whatever. But really, I'm not too fussed about it really, because we do explain very clearly in the video that it's not about the board that runs the coolest, as long as they're all under, whatever you deem to be an acceptable temperature, usually 90 degrees or less, depends on how much you're really pumping the board. But if it can handle a 9950X without thermal throttling, then really that's a pass. Even if it's 100 degrees, that's a pass generally. But at the same time, if we have two $100 motherboards and one of them can stress test a 9950X 3D for an hour and only hit 70 degrees, and the other one hits 100, and they're the same price, they have all the same features, and you can't really distinguish. There's really nothing else about the boards where you're like, do I get that one or that one? And this one runs substantially cooler under a heavy load that you may not ever do, but it's clearly got a better performing VRM, then odds are that's probably going to be a better quality board that may last longer or just look after you a bit better or facilitate a future upgrade that you hadn't planned on doing. So, but I mean, all of that's made very clear in the content about what you should be looking at and how relevant the various different temperatures are. So if someone's just looking at the graphs and drawing their own conclusions without me providing any additional context or whatever, then that happens, and I don't know what you want me to do about it. Like, people like looking at pictures, but we do explain all of that sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, it's like, we could just not do this. And, Buildzoid could not have put in all the time and effort he put in educating people like myself, who then go and do additional testing. And you could have boards with like 18 inductors and 4 power stages. And they claim to be like an 18 power delivery board or whatever. So you could still have all that misleading marketing that we had for years and years and years and years until Buildzoid, Gamers Nexus, ourselves and others started doing the testing. So it's not like I feel guilty or anything. I'm pretty happy with the situation. But yeah, you definitely don't need to spend more. The content isn't about spending more money. It's about finding out which boards offer the best performance at a given price point. All right, that is going to do it for part 3 of this month's Q&A, being October. That is this month, isn't it?
Yes,
Actually,
and it will definitely be October when this video is released.
Yeah, that's where I was heading with that. Yep. If it says November, just pretend it's October for us.
Yep.
So, and you have to do it the following month as well. But that's it. Awesome Q&A series, I think. Had a lot of fun. There was some different questions, which I sort of said at the start, but we'd read through them. And yeah.
We've upset Linux gamers, I think, in a previous part once again, which I always enjoy.
Well, that was in part 2, I think we did that, depending on how these were broken up.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was
actually could have even been part 1.
Yeah.
I don't know where that question ended up getting stuck because, of course, we filmed this all in one big chunk. Yeah. People often ask me, why don't you guys just get together and do the podcast together? Why don't you film the Q&A in parts throughout the month or whatever? So, we get like one a week or something. And I try to explain to them that although Tim and I are both Australian, Australia is quite large, and it just so happens, luckily, by pure coincidence really, because we didn't actually meet knowing we both lived in the same state, that we live 2.5 hours apart, 3 hours, depending on traffic. So it took Tim about 3, you said the traffic was bad this morning.
Yeah, it was.
About 3 hours?
Yeah, I think 2 hours 40, something like that. Which,
Took Tim about 2 hours, 40 minutes to get here this morning. So that's why we don't catch up multiple times per month, because it's close to a 6-hour round trip. It's a long day for Tim. So everyone appreciate Tim and coming here to film this.
That is why we do the podcast remotely.
It's Appreciate Tim Day, the Q&A series.
It's always
You
nice.
like that?
Yeah,
See, I'm not ripping on you. It's nice, isn't it?
But yeah, I mean, if you want more of this sort of content on a weekly basis, the podcast is pretty similar to the Q&As.
But you don't drive for those.
We don't drive. It's just done remotely.
Yeah, people want to see us in like a custom. I think that's what they get annoyed about. Yeah. Like we're doing this I think they see it as we're doing a lazy sort of webcam type way, and we're not getting together sitting on like a couch. We've got like a podcast set up, we sip some tea, talk about tech.
What we could do is we both make a set that looks very similar. I've got one half and you've got the other half.
Yeah, okay.
And then we just do multi-camera editing so it looks like we're physically in the same building.
Yep.
But actually I'm at my place and you're at your place.
I like
and
it.
we sort of still do it remotely. But we just, and maybe we if we do a split screen, we can like try stitch it nicely. Because I could not be here. I could be green screen right now, and I'm actually not here because I've never crossed over. Because if I move further into that zone, it ruins the illusion for people. But it's possible I'm just still in my studio, green screening it up right now.
Yep, may have inadvertently exposed us. Anyway, Tim lives a long way away, is what I'm trying to get at. So once a month is when we catch up. How did this conversation start? Doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah,
it's now irrelevant. You're just wondering why this video hasn't ended.
You're helping out our watch time numbers by listening to this rambling at the end, which is nice.
Well, we say that, but there's probably like 2% retention at this point.
Yeah, it's probably pretty bad. It's probably pretty dire. We see the numbers like, oh.
Yeah, Balin, can you edit the last 5 minutes out because we've actually killed this video. Yeah. So on that note, I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.